moment. Nearly 5 years ago now, I was touring the media studios in the immediate aftermath of that dentist from Minnesota that decided he wanted to kill a lion in Hawaii National Park, Cecil the lion. What that particular incident did was bring to the world's attention the horror of trophy hunting. Yes, that lion was a collared lion as part of an Oxford research project. Yes, Walter Palmer had basically shot that lion with a bow and wounded it. That lion then went off into the bush for nearly 8 hours to be finished with a gun. You can imagine the pain and suffering of that animal. That animal was a mature lion that had generated millions and millions of dollars for the Zimbabwe tourist industry. And it was killed in this horrific way by this stupid, ignorant, greedy dentist that is basically a good example of the sort of people that want to kill wildlife for so-called trophy hunting. Do any of you think that's right? Well, the horror of Cecil the lion, I'm afraid, has largely dissipated in the mind of the world over the last 5 years. We've had many other things on our mind, from Brexit and President Trump and climate change and everything else. But let's be clear, the trophy hunting industry continues to grow. The numbers of lions incarcerated in a conveyor belt of cruelty in South Africa in the so-called canned hunting operations is now in its thousands. There's a corrupt system from the ANC government to the Afrikaan farmers who regulate and control all this mess just to make money. Thousands and thousands of lions are being shot to order, and throughout their life they're exploited. The so-called lion petting projects that you can go on as tourists, where you don't ask questions, where you can feed the lion cubs, and you spend thousands of dollars for the privilege. The so-called walking with lion projects, where you can walk with semi-adult lions, again spending a lot of your tourist dollars for the privilege. And then finally, when the lion gets to a mature age, it's incarcerated in an area where it's then brought out with meat hung off a tree to be shot at by someone who's probably had a day's practice at best of using a gun and often wounds the animal, and someone who's more skilled as a marksman has to finish it off next to it. And then they take the skin, or they take the head and they take it back to Dallas, or they take it back to Seoul, or they take it back to London to put on their wall. They're not asking about what happens to the bones and the carcass. Even that has a market, that has a value. Now the South African government are allowing the regulated trade of lion bones into Southeast Asia. Vietnam, Laos, China, which feeds this medicine trade, that then feeds, as Jane has said, the destruction of what's left of Africa's wild lions. Probably 25,000 is all that's left across the whole continent of Africa. So if any trophy hunter, and I have this a lot when you go on radio or television and talk about this, they always say, well, there's an ecological benefit, there's an economic benefit, there's even big NGOs, wildlife conservation NGOs that support this. But that just doesn't stack up. Most of the money from trophy hunting, the likes of Walter Palmer paying to kill Cecil the lion, is not going to local communities, it's not going to the ecological benefit of certain areas of Africa. It's going into safari companies' hands. It's going into the hands of corrupt government officials, and it's just destroying wildlife at an unprecedented rate. There is no justification at all for killing some of the rarest, most endangered species on this planet just because you've got a lot of money in your pocket. Wouldn't you agree? It's a disgrace. And yes, we've got a debate in this country about just stopping the import of these trophies and the export. Well, that shouldn't be a debate at all. We don't need a bloody consultation. Let's just stop it. It's insane. It has to stop now. Wouldn't you agree? Yes, come on, Boris Johnson. Pull your finger out. Just ban the bloody stuff. But that's not just about the wildlife around Africa. It's also the wildlife in this country that's under threat as well. And credit to people like Emily Lawrence and League Against Cruel Sports and other campaign groups that have been basically picketing outside Woburn Safari Park, that have been saying, listen, it's not acceptable to breed rare species of deer for the gun for commercial operations in this country or anywhere else in the world. Wouldn't you agree? You shouldn't be able to kill European bison in Scotland. You shouldn't be able to kill stags in Scotland. You shouldn't be able to kill rare species of deer at Woburn. You shouldn't be able to go to remote Scottish islands like certain American trophy hunters do to kill deer, to kill sheep, to kill goats. Wouldn't you agree? If you're going to stop trophy hunting in Africa, you better well stop it in Britain as well. But it's a disgrace. And that's the issue here. The war on wildlife isn't just a global fight, it's a fight at home as well. We have the biggest fight on our hands to protect what's left of our wildlife in this country. It could be foxes, it could be badgers, it could be birds of prey, it could even be species like beavers and otters that we're reintroducing to our countryside, all of which are under threat from developers, landowners, farmers, hunters, and just basically maniacs who want to kill and maim animals. Wouldn't you agree? And we've got to fight it every single day, and all credit, let's have a round of applause for the hunt monitors and the hunt SABs and all those people on the front line who are fighting that battle day in, day out, in the cold, in the wet, with no thanks, but they do it because they care. Because if it wasn't for them, the situation would be far worse than it is today. And I've got to talk about badgers, because Nigel's absolutely right, you know. Killing badgers is almost like an NFU-funded trophy hunting programme as far as I'm concerned. We're waiting on the government now to announce the badger cull figures. They've delayed since December when they usually announce, because there's a big battle going on in government and a big battle going on in Whitehall about what's going to go on with this train wreck of a policy. But we expect in 2019 that over 40,000 badgers were killed within 6 weeks. That's the biggest destruction of a protected species in the history of this nation. Do any of you think that's acceptable? And we're pushing these animals as a result to the verge of local extinction in parts of this country where they have lived since the Ice Age. Since the Ice Age. And we have the largest population of badgers anywhere in Northern Europe. Farmers say to me, we're being overrun by them. Why are you worried, Dominic? You're just exaggerating. No, we are not. We know for a fact there are parts of the country now where we see very few roadkill badgers. The first sign, just as we found with hedgehogs, when the roadkill disappears, you know the animals are in trouble, and they are in real trouble. And we know it's not just badger culling. We probably lose 50,000 badgers a year on the roads. We lose thousands to developers, and we lose thousands to badger baiters and to wildlife maniacs that some of you might have seen reported in the Lincolnshire Press this week, with a lady out with her dogs that came across both badgers and foxes that had been skinned and mutilated. So not only were they killed, the person that left them there wanted to prove a point. Now I'm afraid the person who did that's not just dangerous to animals, they're dangerous to humans as well. Wouldn't you agree? Yes. This is a disgrace, and we have to find an end to it. And we can find an end to it, but I'm afraid the National Farmers Union thinks it runs this government. It thinks it can kill any wild animal it wants that gets in the way of its farming systems. And let's be clear about those farming systems. They've got to change. It's not just me saying that. If you look at the former DEFRA chief scientist, Ian Boyd, the very architect of this policy, is now out of DEFRA. He's now turned vegan, and he's saying that livestock farmers should give up and start rewilding their land. Not only that, he's going to come to the Badger Trust Symposium in November, and he's going to say that as well. We know this policy is in trouble. We know this policy is in trouble because on April Fool's Day, the National Farmers Union are taking a judicial review against the government, who decided last year not to issue a licence for badger culling in Derbyshire. They're dragging the partner of the Prime Minister into that, because I had the audacity, as far as they're concerned, to go into Downing Street to meet with her, who then spoke to Boris Johnson, who made sure that he knew the concerns we had, and hopefully when he took a decision, it was influenced by those concerns. They say that's wrong. I say that's completely legitimate. We have a right to influence anyone we choose to, just as they do. And I'm really grateful, because if Prime Minister Boris Johnson stays in Downing Street, which he might for 10 years, he might have a partner beside him that actually does care about animal rights, has been out on marches for whales and other species, and does actually think this is wrong. Wouldn't you agree? And they have no right to silence her, as they have no right to silence you or any of us. Anyone, including the partner of the Prime Minister, has a right to speak up for the welfare of animals and wildlife in this country, and they shouldn't be silenced. And if it has to go to a court, and if that has to set a legal precedent that they have an opinion and they're entitled to it, so be it. Because we'll fight the NFU in the courts. We will not allow you to run this government and destroy our wildlife to keep your dirty, inefficient farming systems running, when we know there's a massive decline in meat and dairy consumption in this country. We know that those systems are feeding climate change anyway, and they have to change. We want to help farmers change. We want to protect our wildlife, and we want to use our taxpayers' money efficiently. We are in a war on wildlife, but we'll win it because we're caring and compassionate. We'll win it because we're right. We'll win it because this country, despite we have many differences, we care deeply about animal welfare and wildlife protection. That's why the debates about foxes and the debates about badgers and trophy hunting become such big discussions in this country. Just leave you one thought. Boxing Day, you remember a certain leading QC decided he was going to club a fox to death and then boast about it on Twitter. In most other countries, that wouldn't have even got a rumour or an interest anywhere. In this country, it sent social media insane. It led the front pages of the newspapers for 3 days. And I think what it showed was not only he was arrogant and stupid and cruel, but people in this country won't put up with that horror, won't put up with that type of behaviour, and we make a stand. Wouldn't you agree? And that's what makes Britain great, despite our differences. That's why we're here today. That's why we will keep marching and keep fighting for wildlife. And that's why ultimately, because of all the greed, ignorance and stupidity that leads to the destruction of wildlife in this world, the moral case, the care and compassion will win. Thank you very much.
Go.